Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, big changes in the way students will be tested, but first, guess what? Kathleen Kane, the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania, will not seek re-election. All of that follows these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, the big news of the past week, the Attorney General Kathleen Kane says she will not seek a second term. I don't know that that comes as a big surprise. There are some reasons for it. Joining me to talk about that and more, Pete Muntean. He's the Capitol reporter, not recorder. He does record as well as report, however. That's right. Pete Muntean with WGAL-TV and author and journalist and columnist Brad Bumsted, Pittsburgh Tribune-Review. I'm getting a fee from you guys for the way I just introduced you. Right? All right, Brad. Let's start with the big question. WHY. Why did Kathleen Kane say,
I think it's simple. I think it's simple. She could not get the 1,000 signatures needed to get on the ballot. People close to her have told me that she just has no organization left to be able to get the basic thing to get on the ballot. Now, that's the specific reason, but the more general reason is, she's facing a criminal trial. She's going to have to be fighting impeachment in the House. She's lost her law license, at least in terms of being applicable and usable in Pennsylvania. It's suspended. Yeah. So fighting things on all those fronts, it's hard, to run for re-election, which is virtually a full-time job, unfortunately, in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. So Pete, if you think about this, when you've got these 12 charges, 2 of them felonies having to do with whether she lied before and then covered up a grand jury, and that trial is scheduled for this summer in August.
And Kane says it's not part of her reasoning for not seeking re-election. Well, I asked her that. We had a little bit of time one-on-one, her and I, after her announcement when she said that she wasn't seeking re-election. And I said, no mention of the criminal charges you're facing. And she says it has nothing to do with this decision, that she plans on being acquitted and thinks that when the facts come out in a court of law, that she'll be in the clear. Now, it seems...
but you have to defend yourself. Both of you have covered trials, so this is not new for you. Right. Brad wrote a book about a lot of corruption in our state. How do you defend yourself? And 2 of them are serious. They're misdemeanors, but there are 2 felonies in there, right? 2 felonies for... Go ahead.
Well, I think what Brad is getting at is it's the division of time. How do you defend yourself and continue to run and still try and run the Attorney General's office? Kane says this all boils down to her family, that she has 2 teenage sons at home, and that she needs to spend more time with them, that they were a part of this decision. She's now a single mother, and that is a full-time job, and that she just made the decision. The announcement was on Tuesday, only the weekend prior, she told me.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, well, every politician that steps down almost always cites family reasons. I want to spend more time with my family. And that's what she was saying here. And maybe that is the reason. We can't doubt her on that. But on the other hand, if it's to spend more time with her 2 boys, that didn't seem to be a factor the past 3 years when she was Attorney General and had to travel and spend an enormous amount of time. So that's part of it. But look, she's also her life apparently is a wreck. She's in the midst of a divorce. And she filed, and it's out there. It's public record. And not that we get into personal lives, but when you've got your personal life crashing and your professional life,
you can't rule out that it could be a combination. I think that
usually everything there's multiple reasons.
Good point. So you've got the personal side, you've got the professional side. And Pete, there's one thing still outstanding. Let's move this back to the infamous pornographic emails. She's hired what's, I think, a special deputy, whatever Doug Gansler, a former attorney general in Maryland, somewhat of a controversial figure himself. He has possession of thousands of pornographic, well, I'll say this, allegedly pornographic, racist, and...
We could call them raunchy in the simple term.
Raunchy.
Yeah.
They could still come out and...
And she vows to continue that crusade, to expose this so-called old boys network that she says is complicit in a conspiracy to railroad and get her out of office. Yeah. And she says in her time remaining, a little less than a year in office, that will be a big focus of what she's done. And she tries to hang her hat on some accomplishments. And throughout this about 15-minute long speech saying she will not seek re-election was more of a rehashing of the things that she's done. A child predator unit, a mobile street crimes unit. But she still says that pornographic emails are the big keystone.
I want to run to a break. When I come back, I want to ask you, this email scandal has cost, I forget the number of people, maybe 15, 18 people their jobs. Not all of them even still working in the Attorney General's office.
Some practice.
Yeah, I want to get into that with you and where you think that's likely to go. All right, we'll be back. We're talking about the future in elected political office, not very great for the Attorney General Kathleen Kane.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Kathleen Kane has decided she's the Attorney General of the state of Pennsylvania. She won't seek re-election. We're talking about that and the ramifications coming out of that decision. With Brad Bumsted and Pete Muntean, reporters who have been covering this saga for some time. All right, before we went to the break, we were talking about these pornographic emails. Here's something that I don't understand. A year ago, January, not last month, a year ago, January, the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania said, you have these emails, they're personal, you can release them, but finish.
But you have to do it in a uniform manner or something, is how they put it. All right? So here's what's happened, is there's a clear pattern of Kathleen Kane using these emails whenever she gets in trouble and to use them against political enemies. So she's parsed them out a little bit at a time against different officials. And as you pointed out, numerous people have lost their jobs over this. Right now, we have a Supreme Court justice suspended with pay pending a trial because of the raunchy emails that she sent to the Judicial Conduct Board. I'm not saying that these shouldn't be out or that the justice did the right thing, just that why is she doing this in a piecemeal fashion?
Yeah, I don't know.
When the Supreme Court ruled that, and as the Philadelphia Inquirer was in court, in Commonwealth Court, I had a right to know up request pending as well, and her office took a formal position that these should not be released to the public.
Yeah, I mean, that contradiction, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, right? I mean, I'm sure you would like, everybody would like to, I mean, it's ruined people's lives. I'm not defending them at all. I'm saying, but it could have a huge effect on the politics of the state, on folks you can't rule out people in the administration or county prosecutors or people in the attorney. Go ahead.
Well, and then, of course, it includes many people in her office, even current employees.
Yeah.
And so I think we're going to see the pornographic emails.
Her own sister who got, what, 28 of them?
And I think we're going to see this continue to come up in the campaign that is now absent of Kathleen Kane.
Let's move to this campaign. All right, we're going to have looks like a pretty significant, if not bruising, Democratic primary to replace Kathleen Kane. There are 3 candidates running, and already the issues seem fairly clear among the 3. Let's talk a little bit about that race, which features Stephen Zappala, DA from Allegheny County, Josh Shapiro, a former state lawmaker who's a county commissioner, and John Morganelli, the DA from where? From
Northampton.
Northampton, right.
Well, clearly, Mr. Zappala will be making the point and pressing that his record as a prosecutor contrasting with Shapiro. A lot of people think this is as you pointed out to me, the conventional wisdom, it's an east-west race between Shapiro from Montgomery County and Zappala from the west. And Zappala will be making the point that, look, I've been a prosecutor for, it's almost 20 years, and Shapiro has never been a prosecutor, and you need to be Attorney General. Shapiro will make the case that what he's about is reform. He is the reform candidate coming after Kathleen Kane. He said to me last week, we're not electing the 68th DA. Okay, this is not a race for the 68th DA. But the irony is John Morganelli, who may not have some of the popularity or the access to the money that these two will, probably has more courtroom experience as a prosecutor than either.
And he's run 4 times. This is his 4th time, I think.
He's done 25 murder trials and gotten convictions.
Yeah, so this doesn't seem like, I mean, who knows what the voters are going to think about this, but this is a little hard to get I mean, you've covered a lot of campaigns, Pete. This is hard to get a handle on, isn't it?
Well, it's interesting to see, will be interesting to see what the Republicans will do, too, and if they'll have an edge, because Kathleen Kane herself was a Democrat.
And the lead candidate there is State Senator John Rafferty. I think there's
It's endorsed by the Republican Party.
Yeah.
A tough-on-crime kind of guy, and now Joe Peters, formerly of Kathleen Kane's office. He was her press secretary, one of many press secretaries that she's
7.
had. Right.
Maybe 8.
So, go ahead. No, please.
Well, I would say in Joe Peters' defense, there is nobody in either primary who has the breadth of experience that he has. He was a federal mob prosecutor in the Little Nicky Scarfo conviction. He worked for every attorney general in the state of Pennsylvania, including Kane, and he was a Scranton police officer. So nobody has really broad experience.
But Pete, this isn't always about who has a long resume, and we yet don't know. The voters aren't likely to get heavily invested in an attorney general's race. We got a presidential race. We got a U.S. Go ahead.
Senate race. But I think that now, because of what has happened in this office, it really cranks up the heat on this campaign and the primary. Typically a not very motivated primary. An April 26th primary, not something that's going to be super hot for the AG's race, but I think we're going to see some things possibly get a little ugly.
Well, and having pointed out, as you did, that Peters was a former Kane spokesman, all the Republican Party and its operatives have to do is put out a mailer that says, Joe Peters, former Kane spokesman. And there you go. It's very tough to beat right now.
All right, here we go. The House, last question. The House is scheduled to go through what will be a lengthy investigation to see if they want to move forward with impeachment charges. Do you think they actually do this? I'm going to ask both. Do you think they actually bring articles of impeachment up, or do you think they just keep this alive for the next couple of months pending her trial in August?
Well, both. I mean, I think it'll track along with her, coming up to her trial in August, and if she's convicted, they'll move forward with it.
Well, that's the word.
It's going to take months, at the very least.
All right. All right, big changes in the way our students in our schools get tested, and then we'll take a look at the education budget. We'll be back in a moment and do all of that.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
All right, we're going to switch the subject. We're going to go about testing in the schools, and joining me is Jerry Oleksiak. He's the president of Pennsylvania State Education Association. He spent more years than I think he wants to admit at Upper Merion, middle school doing special ed. I'll tell you, that's tough. I mean, I want to tell you, special education, it's so important, but yet it's not easy, is it, as a teacher, right?
No, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I enjoyed the kids. I enjoyed the challenge. It was never boring, never dull. It was a very exciting, and it was great training for what I'm doing now in Harrisburg.
Yeah.
So.
But the other thing is you got all these changing rules and regulations. I'll bet when you started doing it, when you left, I mean, it was like night and day, right?
It is. We probably had more in-services, Terry, around
oh my gosh.
IEPs and changes in IEPs with the federal government, state government. So,
well, I think anybody that, you know, as a former teacher myself, I mean, I think it's God's work. It's maybe the single most important thing. You know, I'll be careful about that we do, and I won't go on that. But we're going to talk.
Please keep talking.
No. We're going to talk about testing. Big controversies over standardized tests. You agree? I mean, in this state where we have them and with no child left behind, but there have been big changes that are coming on something called Every Student Succeeds Act.
The ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. Every Student Succeeds Act, which became law in December and goes into effect in September of 2017. And it really is a significant, important change in how we approach standardized testing, not just in Pennsylvania, but across the country. It was, No Child Left Behind is gone, and we're happy to see it go. The whole test and punish, AYP, annual yearly progress, the toxic testing atmosphere has changed. And it was, the good thing about this is it had bipartisan support.
I was going to say, liberals and conservatives,
both
Democrats,
sides.
we finally got something we can all agree on, right?
We had in Pennsylvania, Senator Casey was a big advocate of it, and two Republican congressmen, Congressman Costello and Congressman Thompson, were very important in getting this passed.
So let's go through a couple of the features. You know, annual yearly progress test gone, apparently?
That's gone. Well, it's really, what the main thing that it does is it puts the decision-making back where it really belongs, at the state and local level. Yeah. And it requires people like me, the teachers and our unions, to have some input into this. It allows for parents to have some input into this. It really puts the focus back at the state and local level. And we will be advocating diligently for what we think is the right approach. Sure. This is a great opportunity to look at the whole testing culture that we've created. And
too much time spent on testing,
too much time, too much expense, and what's equally troublesome is what's lost with all the emphasis on testing. We've seen it. Ask any parent, ask any classroom teacher. We've seen cutbacks in art, music, phys ed, extracurriculars. Our vice president, Dolores McCracken, she brought in a kit that she saw at a toy store for kindergartners, getting them ready for standardized testing. Kindergartners. Yeah. So the focus has just been way too much, and it's time to change that.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is good about it is you're also going to be allowed to do some. You can explain this in greater detail. Some pilot programs to see what works and doesn't work.
Right. The law allows, I think it's 7 states to get involved in pilot programs looking at alternative assessments, ways to do it better. Whether or not Pennsylvania gets involved in that pilot program is yet to be determined. So we hopefully I know we will be working with the Department of Education and the Wolf administration to have some input in that decision.
All right, we're going to run to a break. I want to ask one more question about this, and I'll leave you with it to think about, and that's the opt-out situation, and then we'll go to a break. When we come back, we'll do that, and we'll also get into the education budget. All right, we'll see you after a few words from our sponsors.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Welcome back with Jerry Oleksiak. He's the president of the Pennsylvania State Education Association. We're talking about testing. We're going to the education budget in a minute. All right. Maintains the right of parents to say to their students, you can opt out. Right. What are the reasons? What generally are the reasons that you opt out?
Currently, the only reason you can opt out in Pennsylvania is for religious reasons, but that's pretty broadly interpreted. The state is very open-minded about how the parents do that. What we tell our members is, when they're asked about it, our people in the classroom, that refer the parent to the district. Let the parent work with the district on whether or not it's the right thing to do, or the process that you would use. It's a growing movement. There are more and more people.
I was going to say, yeah, and just in my reading about it in other states as well, there seems to be a huge proportion of people that are opting out. And in some ways, you can understand why there's a legitimate reason to have opt-out. On the other hand, there can be people who just say, I oppose testing, I'm going to find a reason. And then you could have a problem there with, you get it, with some people who should be taking it or not.
And really, every child, as we were talking earlier, every child reacts differently to these tests. And there are, it's really the high-stakes nature. There's a lot of pressure on kids, on the educators, on school districts to do well. And the hope is that ESSA, the recently passed act, will take some of that emphasis on testing away, and we'll get back to what we do best.
All right, obviously, let's turn to the budget, and particularly the education budget. The governor, as you know, wants about $365 million, I think. No, he wants more than that, actually. He wanted $365. That was in the so-called framework, and then he wants to add $200 million to that. But here's the problem that I think a lot of people have. We can argue over how much the schools should get, but why should the schools go through the pain, the suffering, and the agony over not getting anything for 6 months, and having people who are subjected to the damage who are not involved in this fight?
And more specifically, I agree. And it's not just, it's more specifically, it's kids that are being hurt by this. Real kids in real classrooms today as we speak. You ask a great question. I would suggest that your listeners contact their state legislators and ask them why it's taken this long. Clearly, there are serious needs. We've been underfunded in public education for many, many years. The state's own admission years ago, the costing out study, it wasn't being funded properly. Our legislators have to make a decision. Are we going to continue to value public education for not just the good that it does for kids, but the economic value it brings to the state? And
the other
that's
thing is
that
because we have this delay, schools, the Auditor General has been doing these audits, and we're talking about millions and millions of dollars that have been borrowed by schools. So not only is there the threats of teacher layoffs, staff cutbacks, program curtailments. We have about 50 seconds. Go ahead.
Right. Well, right now, the latest figure I saw is districts, it's about $50 million in interest that they owe on, for what they've had to borrow. And over 60% of our districts are going to have to borrow money to stay open. If they can do that, we're very concerned that there will be schools closed if something doesn't happen.
You get the last word. Well, the state ought to pick up that $50 million. Burden shouldn't fall on the schools. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.